Navigating the dynamics of the Korean Peninsula requires more than just information. It demands insight. Korea Risk Group offers strategic consulting that cuts through the noise. Our experts provide in-depth analysis, risk assessments, and bespoke reports, all tailored to your specific needs. Whether you're exploring new opportunities or managing existing challenges, our insights can be your compass. To learn more about how we can help you make informed, strategic decisions, visit korearisk.com/solutions today. Hello listeners and welcome to the NK News Podcast. I'm your host, Jacco Zwetsloot, and today it is Monday, the 10th of November 2025, and I'm here in the NK News studio joined by Chad O'Carroll. Chad, welcome back on the show.
Hey Jacco, good to be here.
Some big and interesting stories to talk about that have happened the last week. The big change in North Korea, the end of an era, the death of Kim Yong Nam, once technically the head of state of North Korea, right? He was, what was his title? The president of the Presidium of the Supreme People's Assembly. Gosh, it was such a long time.
Yeah.
And it meant so little because he had no power, did he?
Right. Well, except for receiving ambassadors and senior diplomats when they provided their credentials.
I believe that current UK ambassador to South Korea, Colin Crooks, presented his credentials to Kim Yong Nam in North Korea, as did the recent former Hungarian ambassador Moses Choma, and that was important because it was Kim Yong Nam who received the bad news that Hungary was going to be the first member of the East Bloc to recognize South Korea as a nation back in, I want to say, 1989 or something like that. And Kim Yong Nam exploded and got very angry, and then decades later, had to welcome a new ambassador back to North Korea. Anyway, but yeah, so he was the last of that generation. He was, 97? He was with Kim Il-sung in the early days. He was really one of that first generation, and there probably aren't any left at all, at least in positions of influence. And he'd been retired for a couple of years.
Yeah, and he'd also led various delegations around the world. He'd been to Africa.
Been to South Korea.
Yes, he went to South Korea in 2018.
Right.
Yeah, with Kim Yo Jong, I remember.
To the Pyeongchang Olympics opening ceremony.
Yeah. I remember reading, and I've not been able to get the time to look this up, but I remember reading an account of the air choreo, I believe it was an air choreo plane that flew into Kimpo Airport with Kim Yo Jong and him. And when he got off the plane, before he'd go on the bus, he insisted on having a cigarette. Which I think was against the rules, but he just did it anyway, which is impressive given his age.
Now, I remember reading somewhere that he was reluctant to sit down before Kim Yo-jong, if I'm not mistaken, right? That he was sort of showing deference to a member of the Kim family, and that one might be one reason to explain why, out of all of the top officials of North Korea, as far as we know, he'd never been purged. He'd never been sent to a re-education camp or a salt mine or a cooperative farm out in Hamgyeongbuk-do. He stayed in the top leadership, the top echelons of North Korean leadership until the end, until he retired.
Yeah, very loyal public servant and stayed in his lane. And yeah, I mean, I think he, to have lived and served so many free North Korean leaders and stay in place in a key, relatively important role, it's a big deal. So, yeah, we knew this was coming. He was getting older and older, but I think it was an important one for many because of just his sheer level of connection, both inside and outside of the government, into foreign countries as well.
Knew so many people, and one other interesting theory that I've heard for why he had such longevity was that he had a weak spot, which meant that he could never get his own circle of powerful people around him. He could never be his own, powerful figure. And that was that apparently, and this is quite rare in North Korea, and North Korea frowns upon this, he was a man who preferred the company of other men.
That's one rumor that has circulated in recent days. I'm unable to corroborate it.
Yeah, it's only hearsay, but we heard this from people who heard it from those who met him over the years, particularly Eastern European diplomats, apparently. So from the, before the Cold War ended.
Yeah, I would also point listeners to, I think there was an article called Being Gay in the DPRK, which my former colleague wrote, probably a decade or so ago, which is really interesting because it talks about just the difficulty. If that is your preference, it's very difficult to live in North Korea, and a lot of people don't really know that they are gay as a result of the system that they're surrounded by. So it's
denied, it's rejected.
Yeah.
And South Korea was a little bit that way too. I remember when I first lived in the 1990s, it was there are no gays here, or if they are, they've been tainted by foreigners or something like that.
Yeah, and I guess without like cultural references on the TV or radio or popular media, if you are gay, I mean, you wouldn't have any external references perhaps to know what's going on. And so I'm sure just like in South Korea, there are many people who are married and family people who are actually not really into that.
Now, we should point out that we don't have any concrete proof that this is the case for the late Kim Yong Nam, but just that it's a little bit of scuttlebutt. I mean, this is a podcast after all, not a news story with two anonymous sources. But anyway,
we've gone news of the world here.
a little bit, yeah. Okay. Now, you wrote a piece that was a long time coming about the Pyongyang Papers. And it's a website that's existed for a few years, and now it's no longer there. It doesn't exist anymore. So what were the Pyongyang Papers?
Well, interestingly, it dates back to early 2018 when those summits were taking place that we just referenced.
Yeah.
And for me, that's interesting because it must have stemmed out of the Fire and Fury maximum pressure campaign that Donald Trump led in late 2017, which was a lot of sanctions pressure and focus. Anyway, in a nutshell, the website presented itself as a volunteer-run operation that was seeking to cast light on sanctions violations in North Korea. And it posted quite unique content every few weeks, every month or so.
Documents often, right? Or information, documents, data.
And often the prose...
Names.
Yeah, often the prose would be quite, very focused on like kind of bringing down the regime type rhetoric and what how much hypocrisy there is in the upper echelons of the North Korean leadership. But buried in all this like quite heated rhetoric were key data points, key information, facts. Like for example, Pyongyang Papers has learned that Ship X will be carrying 200,000 tons of coal on this date, which was very interesting.
And very specific.
Very, very specific. And the more we saw them doing this, the more we got curious about what was going on exactly. And maybe, we can talk about that. But that was the gist of the website. And it continued until this year. It was deleted in the last 2 to 3 months. And the social media accounts were also deleted.
Wow.
So a very unusual, sharp end to the website.
Yeah. Now, I remember a couple of times over the years reaching out to them and requesting an interview with them. You remember this too, because I shared this with you at the time, that they were very reluctant. They would write back with either anonymously or just a single first name. They asked if they could do the interview in writing. I said, that's not really how a podcast works. And they said, well, how about we do it, but we type in the responses and then put that in through a computer-generated voice, or we do voice modulation, and we just couldn't go ahead with that. That's not the way that we do things here at the NK News Podcast. And in the end, the last time I wrote to them, I think it was in April of this year, I did get a reply back, but it was like, well, look, we're sorry, we're not going to be able to help you with that. And so no podcast ever happened, and never really did find out the identities of the people behind it. But all that level, that granular level of detail, it's the kind of stuff that you would expect to see in a panel of experts report, which panel of experts no longer exists, the United Nations panel of experts on sanctions enforcement.
And look, some of the people I spoke to told me that, and I spoke to people that were formerly on the panel of experts. I spoke to open source, very specialized sanctions investigators from some of the big think tanks or research groups you may know of. And there was a couple times people said that Pyongyang Papers almost played a kind of hand of God role So, for example, when there was an active investigation going on into, for example, oil smuggling in the Taiwan Strait, going to North Korea, or panel of experts investigations into what's going on in Africa in country ABC, that sometimes the Pyongyang Papers would dump highly relevant information just as people were working on those very issues. And then
relevant and timely.
And, that got people wondering further who is behind it, because, I've been doing this for 15 years and I've seen North Korea blogs, websites, personalities come and go. We're a weird oddball collection, but I don't really know of anyone that's shy of talking to the media, because fundamentally people start websites because they want to share. They have some degree of ego. They want to be associated with the work they're doing. And so this was very odd that they were so resistant to talking about their work.
Yeah, because it was an outfit that had information that was impossible or very difficult to find elsewhere, and, as you point out, very relevant and timely to investigations done by the panel of experts. Could it have been a release valve or controlled leaks by an intelligence organization somewhere in the world?
I would say that's probably the most likely explanation. Because this is very privileged information, and it was being, there was a campaign-like aspect to it. It was ongoing for, I think, almost 7 years.
Yeah.
No one really, sanctions is such a specific... People have in the past run blogs to talk about North Korea human rights or the humanitarian situation or finding ways to get information in and out of the country. But sanctions is really, frankly, something that volunteers, independent people don't really have much skin in the game to research unless they want to bolster their credentials and CV, but see above. This entity or person didn't want to do that.
And also a lot of organizations that are trying to help North Koreans or do things related to North Korea, they need money to keep a website going. They need money to pay, for costs of volunteers, even if the volunteers are not salaried. Did Pyongyang Papers, did they request money? Was there a donate website or something like that, or a GoFundMe?
Yeah, but this was also suspicious because there was a QR code on the website that offered a way to send money to a Bitcoin account. But when you took your phone out to scan it, my device always said no data contained within this QR code.
So it went to it basically didn't lead to a wallet.
It didn't go to any wallet.
That's weird.
Yeah.
So you're asking for donations. You've made a QR code. If there's a wallet, it's not related to the QR code. So no one could donate to this.
No one could donate, even if they wanted to. So
that's weird.
That was also, and I went through the Internet Archive snapshots going back to 2018 to make sure it hadn't broken.
Yeah.
And even back then, it didn't resolve. So that was another fishy indicator. Now, just add the language was also strange because whilst on the website we saw, the guys in their emails to you said that they were from. There was one guy that signed himself as Roberto.
Yes.
And they said they're in South America.
Yes.
And on the website, it looked like it was littered with deliberate spelling mistakes to make it look like non-native English. But in correspondence sent to you and I, to be honest, there was a lot of British language. Best wishes as a sign-off is not something I know many Americans to say. Whilst Americans say while. There was a lot of whoever was doing this, I think, was at the very least educated in the UK or lives in the UK.
Did you ever talk to anyone that said, look, I know about this?
No.
Okay, so this is...
No, and I spoke to many people in the sanctions field, and everyone had the same question: who's behind this?
Wow. Well, if anyone out there listening today, if you've got the inside skinny on this, send us an email at podcast@nknews.org or, hit us up on the Twitterverse or something.
Yeah.
Chad, we must move on. We've got one more story to go to, but it's actually a couple of stories that are related. So the U.S. Secretary of War, Pete? Is it Pete Hegseth? His first name? Pete Hegseth. Recently came to Korea shortly after Trump's visit here for APEC. Pete went to the DMZ, or DMZ, if you will, the demilitarized zone. North Korea said that was not good. It called it brazen and vowed an offensive response, and then North Korea launched a missile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, this comes in the context of Trump's failed outreach, failed attempt to meet with Kim Jong Un. That was not responded to. And it just on not just this visit, but other recent developments suggest that we're going backwards, not forwards, when it comes to positive developments on the Korean Peninsula. We've had new State Department sanctions designations, the North Koreans responding, saying this is evidence that it's not a right time to talk and that this is further proof of the US hostile policy. Any of these Department of War, or what used to be Department of Defense secretaries going to the DMZ to peer in, that's something I kind of associate with, frankly, the Obama and...
well, Clinton did it once too, and I think George Bush too.
But I mean...
I thought every visiting president had to go and make a peer across the demilitarized
zone. But I associate with that era, and I mean, I guess Pence did it as well, didn't he, under Trump? But it's kind of an antiquated measure to take when it comes to North Korea, and it has no practical purpose vis-a-vis shifting North. I think it's really just for domestic facing, giving the troops in USFK and South Korean partners a boost, etc. But yeah, it's not something I associate with. I found the timing odd. Like, why have that so soon after Trump was making all this outreach? If it came, months from now, it might not seem that notable. But the sort of A to B of the interest in summits followed by this was a bit odd for me.
Yeah. Now, speaking of that failed chance to meet, are people now talking about another date in the future? Sort of saying, well, maybe they'll meet at this time.
Well,
by they, I mean Trump and Kim.
Yeah, I've heard, we've got the Congress coming up in early 2026.
The North Korean Korean Workers' Party Congress.
Which, the one rumor I've heard, that could include some release valves for increased international engagement, or at least that will be on the agenda. So we should watch for that. But I think it's going to need two to tango, and the North Koreans have made it pretty clear that, at least with the US, they're waiting for a demonstration that there is a fundamental change in approach. And right now it's rather tepid from the US side. And at the start of this year, January, I remember when we did our predictions event, I said we'd see a meeting before the end of 2025.
You did.
I think I'm probably wrong at this stage.
I think there's a good chance you are, right? We're 11 months in.
Yeah.
Gee.
Wrong for the right reasons, as many pundits would say.
All right, that's a fun way to end today's episode. Thank you very much, Chad, for coming on the NK News podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Jacco.
Bestsellers unveiled at NK News Shop. Step out in style with our top-selling apparel from the NK News Shop. Fly high with the Air Cordial T-shirt, celebrating DPRK's golden era of aviation in vintage airline chic. Explore the stars with our Nada hoodie, inspired by North Korea's answer to NASA. Or toast to tradition with our Taedonggang beer T-shirt, capturing the essence of North Korea's renowned brew. Each design is a conversation starter. Find yours at shop.nknews.org. Again, that's shop.nknews.org. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our podcast episode for today. Our thanks go to Brian Betts and Alana Hill for facilitating this episode, and to our post-recording producer genius Gabby Magnuson, who cuts out all the extraneous noises, awkward silences, bodily functions, and fixes the audio levels. Thank you, and listen again next time.